Energy-Storage.news has been reporting and offering insights, analysis and opinion on the global market for a decade. We've seen the industry grow from a handful of megawatt-scale projects scattered around the world to a thriving ecosystem of projects large, small, and in some cases very large indeed. We are proud to support the transition to modern, clean energy sources via smart technologies that allow us, for the first time, to have real flexibility in the electricity system. Energy-Storage.news is part of Solar Media, which also produces titles such as PV Tech, Current and Solar Power Portal, and hosts events including the Energy Storage Summit series. The interview you're about to see was recorded at the 2024 Energy Storage Summit EU in London. Editor Andy Colthorpe speaks with Yann Brandt, Chief Commercial Officer at FlexGen, a solar industry veteran who saw the rising potential of the energy storage industry and jumped on board. FlexGen is an integration services and software technology provider for energy storage solutions, headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina. The company's value proposition is largely centered around its HybridOS energy management system platform, which Brandt told us in a previous interview is aimed at being like the Microsoft Windows of energy storage. The platform is designed to allow asset owners to access the full range of applications and market opportunities available.
It's great to see you here in the UK. As far as I'm aware, FlexGen, has a lot of projects for customers around the US in particular, a lot in ERCOT, quite a lot in the kind of MISO market, so some interesting stuff around, black start applications for power plants in Indiana was a particular one I heard. What's bringing you to the UK this time around, Yann?
Yeah, no, great to be here, Andy. This is my second time at this conference. It's really become the go-to for me personally and now the company to experience what else is happening. But the preface really is correct, is FlexGen has a decade plus of experience of turning batteries on. We don't manufacture any of the batteries. Our focus has always been about making them work, particularly for unique situations. That's what our DNA is rooted in, whether it was microgrids for military oil and gas applications, microgrids, things of that nature. Being here in the UK is really exciting for us this year. Over that life, we obviously built the most bankable and one of the most experienced EMS platforms in the world, primarily in the US, but that's also created data analytics and fleet management capabilities that we have now opened up for existing asset owners here in the UK and more broadly in Europe, as well as through OEM partnerships and EPC partnerships of making our EMS available to the broader market beyond the US.
Okay. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of our readers will be 100% au fait with the role of the energy management system. But yep. I think it's a theme of a conversation you and I have had previously, and probably with other publications. But a lot of people, because the industry its very nature is growing so quickly, a lot of people are on their first asset or maybe by now their second asset. So I don't know how we keep this brief, but in terms of the value proposition of the EMS and why that's so important, could you just maybe speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, I mean, you teed it up because we've had this conversation before. The EMS is the operating system of the energy storage system, and FlexGen is the Microsoft Windows of energy storage. Given we don't manufacture, we have a very wide configuration library of building EMS that works with pretty much every OEM that makes a DC block and every OEM that makes an inverter. The intricacy for those that aren't fully tuned into energy storage and are just starting to get into their portfolio, it's you want the entire system to work, not just the battery and the inverter, but also fire suppression systems, decisions you're going to make on data analytics, how are you going to do your optimization, trading strategies. All of those applications need an operating system that responds to the commands that you want, right? So all of those things are applications that live on top of the operating system, much like, Microsoft Excel might operate within Microsoft Windows. But we are technology neutral in that we work with different OEMs that allows folks that are going to own more than one system to use one platform for their entire investment portfolio.
Okay. And kind of stepping back a little bit towards, in terms of markets, I guess, as we've mentioned, FlexGen has quite a lot of assets operating for customers in ERCOT in Texas and various other parts of the US. I think it's fair to say that the UK is a leading market in Europe, I guess, if not the world. I'm sure the rest of Europe has got a lot to say about, they are working to catch up on that, I guess. But would be interesting, I guess, to get maybe kind of a perspective of someone who's not working in this market every day, albeit I'm sure you've looked at it very closely. Mm-hmm. How does that kind of differ, really, I suppose? And again, I think we have to caveat that with, a project in Texas is probably very different from a project in the Midwest MISO market, is again very, very different from a project in the South, in the Southwest of the US or what have you. But yeah, just in terms of that big picture perspective, how are you kind of looking at how assets operate in those different markets and, some of the analog, some of the comparisons that you can make in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, look, the interesting thing about the global markets as a software business is, there is no limit to the number of markets we're going to operate in. Whether it's the UK or ISO New England or PJM. Right? Yes, the US market is very focused on California ISO and ERCOT today, but FlexGen has also had to go into other markets, and the US energy market really is 50 different countries in and of themselves, with the local rules and then the grid operators, 7 major ones. So whether it's the UK looking at Australia and understanding the needs of those, ultimately it comes down to what is the market going to do from a growth perspective. I mean, the UK is a great example, right? It's an island in and of itself. It has some connection points. Renewable penetration has skyrocketed and will continue to. Electrification of transportation, and fundamentally, you need energy growth in order to create economic growth in markets. So whether it's UK or the rest of Europe, the need for energy storage really far surpasses all of the market forecasts, because the market forecasts are based on what is the economic viability of energy storage. Ultimately, it'll come down over the next 20 years that energy storage is just the slinky of the grid to allow it to expand and contract and put energy where it needs to be.
So I love your analogies, Yann. I think every interview we have a really good analogy kind of emerges from that. But yeah, let's move on from there and kind of think about, I think again, just to bring it back to the UK market briefly, but also I think what the UK market says about the role of digital technologies in the energy transition, because from what I understand, the structure of the UK market in terms of the revenue stack for energy storage being built on lots of different applications means that there's a really important role, not just for the energy management system layer, but above that, what the optimizers and the traders do. And as far as I'm aware, that is a less of a thing, let's say for want of a better phrase, in the US at the moment. So I know that some of the optimizers from the UK are kind of looking at, ERCOT in particular and some of the other US markets. Just wondering what your observations are on that side of things. I guess partly, from your point of view, how that interacts with what FlexGen does. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, how do you kind of look at all these different route to market optimizers, as people increasingly call them, and kind of make judgments on how they do things and how that fits together with what you guys might do?
Look, optimizers and asset owners have an alignment that is mutual, right? They want to make as much money for the asset as possible. That's start there. And if you poll them, really they'll tell you these are the 3 things I'm frustrated about. One, fundamentally, this is the biggest one, is I wish my system were available more than what it is today. So just it's not turning on, there's a fault, whatever it may be, they just want it to work more of the time than what it currently is, which is a problem ingrained in power since the start, right? Power plants shut off all the time. Energy storage equipment does as well, if not properly managed. The second one is they're frustrated with the amount of information that they're getting from their system, right? Just, why is it not working? Why is there a fault? Why is there an alarm? The amount of, sort of IoT, Internet of Things, sensors, et cetera, that are in these systems at the cell level, the rack level, the PCS, the grid connection, whatever, there's so many sensors that are feeding information. Sometimes something comes across and it looks like an alarm, it looks like a fault. But generally, asset owners are frustrated with information coming from the system, sort of the data component. And then the third is they don't fully trust the data that they're getting from fed through. So, if you make an analysis of the UK built assets, most of them were installed with a control system that was originally designed for solar and wind applications, and then put together to work for energy storage, but not purpose-built for energy storage. Sort of more an analog. And I'll give you a bonus one. The fourth thing that they're not complaining about yet, but they're going to, is regulators are always looking at energy storage and saying, we could get more out of it. Maybe we'll do a new product, a new pricing signal. The ability to upgrade those assets, the same way you get a software patch on any of your software that you do today, because these assets were built with purpose-built, sort of more SCADA solutions that are analog in nature, upgrading the sites to the new requirements of regulators is not easy, right? So that will be the fourth frustration that we experienced in ERCOT as the regulations have changed, that UK has not fully experienced yet, but is about to.
Okay. Well, let's take a bit of a case study then from the US, if we could. So I know that the most recent kind of state of charge rules in ERCOT are kind of, they're on pause at the moment, haven't necessarily come in. But what are some of the other regulatory or regulatory changes, and how do those translate into technical things that someone like yourself would have to be thinking about?
Yeah, look, regulators will always, solve for something, and particularly in the U.S., and I think this is a global phenomenon, is energy is highly politicized. There's a lot of money exchanging hands. People are going to have their ingrained, concepts of what they're trying to achieve. So the state of charge rules in Texas weren't a technical problem. They were a financial problem that limited the capability, and I think ultimately what the regulators in Texas saw with the state of charge rules is they were going to lose opportunities to do things that are really valuable to the grid, because people would have kept their batteries charged more often, when so much of the value that batteries can provide at times is to charge the batteries at the moment when the grid needs to get rid of excess capacity or volatility in the frequency, for example. Australia is the same concept. The most amount of money you make is charging a negative rate environment. So a battery doesn't have to be full in order to be valuable. It doesn't make electricity. Again, expansion and contraction, right? It's the slinky again. And so the regulators saw that. But the flip side is, I think it's up to the industry as well, and we try to do this in the trade associations, is to explain and educate the regulatory environment on how to get more out of energy storage that they currently do. Through price signaling, you can create certain behavior. And you see that, the parameters are on one side, California is more of a capacity market through resource adequacy. Batteries really aren't used all that much, sometimes less than 100 cycles a year. Whereas ERCOT, you have asset owners, 1,000 cycles a year. Batteries can handle both things, but if we're going to have batteries installed, then why not use them to its maximum potential? Self-servingly, obviously, is the higher the economic value of energy storage will get, the more capex will get deployed into the market. But it's also around grid expansion, right? We heard the minister speaking this morning at the conference around just where the energy growth is driving the grids towards. How are the grid operators going to keep up? Batteries certainly are a big part of it.
Okay. And so far, we focused on obviously the US, and we talked about the UK because here we are, and I guess that's one of the markets of interest. But this is a European show. It's kind of ostensibly, Energy Storage Summit EU. So, and I gather, in European negative energy pricing scenarios are happening quite frequently now as it goes. Is that something you're looking at as well at the moment, or is it more of a UK focus? Or
no, our focus really has become global in nature, right?
Okay.
Our ideal customer, which is really most asset owners in energy storage, is they're going to own multiple projects with a variety of OEMs, duration. This is forward thinking, but also different chemistries, and in different markets. We want to give them a single platform to operate all of those assets on, And our go-to-market is really dependent on partners. So different OEMs include FlexGen in their offerings. Platform owners specify FlexGen or select FlexGen for their entire portfolio, and EPCs as well, right? So EPCs, they need an EMS solution in their offerings. So we go into the markets. Look, the requirement for, it's not even about energy storage, it's about resilience, right? Third parties, market analysts are saying that energy demand is going to double between 2025 and 2050. Mm-hmm. So, that's a ton of generation that is going to come online. With most of the European countries at 50+% renewable energy, that means variable generation. So you need to create resilience just on that factor. You talk to anyone that works in economic development, in whether it's the team that Amazon has trying to build a data center in Ireland that can't get grid connection, or a large property owner that has to rebuild all of their charging infrastructure because now trucks are becoming electrified. Mm-hmm. The grid connection and the grid capacity doesn't exist for that economic growth to happen. Storage will naturally have to come into play, right? That is the resiliency technology that's commercialized and scalable. How to get it to work for the investment that's required, the trillions of dollars, that's up to the regulators to create the pricing signals. So we won't time the market, and we don't really have to as a software company. But in order to make business sustainable, regulators really have to create good markets that aren't saturated with a little amount of build, like what we're seeing currently and momentarily in the UK. But it's how do you drive that investment thesis that allows people to build businesses behind the market?
Sure. And I think one really interesting thing on that I heard this morning is around the European Union's electricity market design efforts, which there's a lot of different aspects to that. But I think one that people in the storage industry are really interested in is that all the member state countries will have to provide assessments of flexibility within their electricity system, and give constant updates on that. And evidently that's an area where energy storage has a big role to play, really, I guess. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, look, in the same session really is, Germany last year curtailed 8 terawatt hours of renewables. Like, there's an economic value to that. But if you don't send a pricing signal for it, no one will capture that economic value. We all know, and many of us come from the solar arena or other renewables. There's a maturization period that comes in the market. We have to identify and then advocate and educate the regulatory bodies. What I would say is different between the renewable schemes that have existed in Europe over the last 20 years versus energy storage is, there's plans and the member states have to put forward an energy storage plan. Take a step back. The folks running the grids already know that they need energy storage. Mm-hmm. Now they have to sort of figure out the view on how much storage without upsetting one side of the equation or otherwise. We see that in the US as well. I mean, you cover it all the time, around how to make energy storage work within the grand scheme of things. Mm-hmm. The technical need for energy storage far surpasses the market forecast for how much storage will get built. I think SEIA has a white paper for energy storage coming out that'll put a target forward on how much energy storage we expect by 2030. I think even our estimates will be far surpassed by the market need for the actual resilience, mm-hmm. given how much economic growth around electrification exists. And just the digitization of the entire system is just massive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that neatly reminds me of something that I did want to bring up as well, actually, I guess. And I think what a lot of people might not know is that, as you alluded to, you are on the Solar Energy Industries Association, which is the big overarching trade association for US solar industries, as the name says. And you're if I get this right, the chair of the energy storage division for that.
That's right.
just to brief, I mean, you mentioned the white papers coming out.
Yeah.
Like, what are some of the other things? And I think this might be a nice way to finish up on a comment of, you know, what are kind of some of the actions that are being taken, that need to be taken, you know, partly within your work with SEIA, but then also just in generally kind of looking at the market, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. You know, I was just recently fortunate enough to be reelected to the chair of the Energy Storage division at SEIA. And, you know, it is one of the largest solar, but really more broadly, renewable energy trade associations advocating for the policies that will sort of, that the grid is naturally trending towards anyway. Yeah, the white paper is really important first step to both get the market and regulators excited about the capabilities of energy storage, where it's going, i.e. you have to pay attention to this, to educate. You know, there are definitely, folks have some concerns, and, you know, but also to educate on, like, these are the things that are important for you to know about. Also, here are the resources for why you shouldn't be that concerned about this or that. And then third is to open up the communication of, you know, industries willing to work and help you design your market, and, you know, create the market that allows for energy storage to be maximum effective for the grid. Because if you really take a step back, like, this is why we're in, like, the warm-up period of the game, you know, whatever sports analogy you want to use. We're still really using the pricing signals that are meant for not energy storage assets. It's arbitrage for power plants. It's ancillary services for power plants. We're really just, in many ways, we look like a peaker plant that's being dispatched for 15-minute windows. Like, if you look at fast frequency response, very small market and just starting to be talked about in the UK. Like, you can have millisecond response with energy storage. You could have never designed a fast frequency response market for ancillary services for power plants. But those are all the nuances where, you know, trade groups really participate. I think we should do more, you know, certainly, you know, puts me on the spot as well of, you know, just EU, US working together. This is a global landscape. There's not that many people of us that are working full time in energy storage. How do we create lessons learned between the markets and then cross those borders together so we can create a bigger market for all of us?
Oh, that's an awesome message to finish on, I think. Yeah, and thank you so much for your time.
Andy, it's always a pleasure.
I know our readers will appreciate your insights as well.
Excellent.